Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video, yet another series on the revision sessions for the class 10th board examinations. And today we will be revising the chapter How Do Organisms Reproduce? So this is a very important chapter as it has the highest weightage in the biology portion of the science examination. I think it is about 18 marks. So this chapter needs to be understood well. All the concepts of this chapter should be practiced well. Nothing should be left out. Everything should be practiced to the best possible extent. Now, in this revision session, I will be addressing doubts which some of you may have. So as people come in, I will be addressing doubts as any doubts come in. And I'll also be revising the chapter side by side, right? So let's start. Now, in how do organisms reproduce, first thing which you need to understand, first thing which you need to clearly keep in mind is the definition for reproduction. Okay, the definition of reproduction is important. You should know the definition of this word, reproduction. Reproduction is defined as the production of offsprings or production of new organisms by an existing organism of the same kind and here the same kind is very important. This basically means that if a new organism is produced, then it is of the same kind as the parent organism, right? So that is what we define reproduction as. Reproduction is defined as the production of new organisms by any existing organism of the same kind. Okay, the same kind is important. Please, if this is asked in the exam, please write the same kind. It is very important that you write it. Okay, so first of all, the definition of reproduction is very important. The second thing which is important here are the two types of reproduction and the differences between them. Okay, primary and secondary sex organs. Okay, we'll get to that. So the two kinds of reproduction, that is sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Very important that you are clear with these two. Okay, then asexual reproduction. These two are again very important. The types of sexual and asexual reproduction. Then the differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. Very important. The types of asexual reproduction. Very important. The five main types you have, that is fission, then budding, then fragmentation, regeneration, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. Okay, sorry, excuse me, six, not five. Six types of asexual reproduction. Very important. Just remember that. Fission, out of which fission can also be broken down into binary and multiple. Then budding, then fragmentation, then regeneration, then vegetative propagation, and then finally spore formation. The six kinds of reproduction should be on your tips. Each one of them has the diagrams associated to it. Please don't forget to revise the diagrams. So the diagrams should also be clear. So explanation with examples, diagrams, the difference between binary and multiple fission, again important. So difference in this fission process, again important. Spore formation is important. Budding is very crucial, very important with the diagram. Fragmentation, extremely important, fragmentation in a Spirogera filament. And why fragmentation cannot occur in simple organisms, other multicellular organisms. That is an important thing, right? Why fragmentation, the process of fragmentation cannot occur in other multicellular organisms. Why it can only occur in organisms such as simple, well, Spirogera, right? Why? It is because Spirogyra, unlike other multicellular organisms, Spirogyra is a random collection of cells. Random collection of cells. Cells are not differentiated to perform specific functions. It is just a random collection of cells, right? There is no specialized function of cells and this and that. It is a random collection of cells which have come together to form one organism. So it is very, very undifferentiated. Second is that there is no specialized organs for specific functions. So since there are specialized organs for specific functions in most other multicellular organisms, that is why we say that fragmentation process cannot occur in other multicellular organisms. So Spirogyra is just a random collection of cells and there are no specialized organs for specific functions. Hence we say that Spirogyra filaments, they simply divide and break into fragments. Hence it is very, very easy for them to take up fragmentation. But other multicellular organisms, they are much more complex. They have specialized organs for specialized functions. Hence they require special reproductive organs for reproduction process, right? So that is why fragmentation cannot occur in Spirogyra. Now we come to Lord's question, and Lord has asked me a question, that is, we need to find the difference between primary and secondary sex organs. Okay, primary and secondary sex organs. So first of all, the sex organs are of two kinds. Okay, so we'll divide them. First we have the primary sex organs, then we have the secondary sex organs. Now remember one thing, this is something which is not there in the 10th standard course, so don't bother much about this. It's not very, very important. Okay, still from your knowledge point of view, I never like to turn away doubts, so I'm going to consider it anyway. So primary sex organs are the testis and the ovary. These two are the primary sex organs in human beings. Okay, primary sex organs in human beings are your testis and ovary. In secondary sex organs, we have the other sex organs other than the testis and ovary. And the secondary sex organs are also called accessory organs. Okay, accessory organs or accessory glands. Okay, so secondary sex organs may include your seminal vesicles, your Cowper's gland, your prostate gland. So these are your secondary sex organs. Okay, so seminal vesicles, Cowper's gland and prostate gland. These are the secondary sex organs or the accessory organs. So basically they don't perform the primary function of gametogenesis. Do not perform primary function, that is for gametogenesis. Gametogenesis is production of gametes. Okay, so they do not perform the primary function of gametogenesis, that is gametogenesis. Gametogenesis is the production of gametes. So that is not their function. Okay, they do not perform a primary function. Testis and ovary produce the gametes. They have a primary function. But the secondary organs, they do not perform a primary function. They just have a function of facilitating the nutrition, the medium, and to help the sustenance of the gametes. So they, help in sustenance of gametes. Okay, they help the gametes to survive outside the organism. They give them nutrition. Like for sperms, they give them a fluid medium to float in. In females, there are not many secondary organs, right? There is the mammary glands. Okay, in females, you can include the mammary glands, but again, they perform a function which is after pregnancy. After parturition takes place, after the baby is born, then they perform that function. Again, they are a kind of secondary organ. So they basically help in the sustenance of gametes, or they basically perform a secondary function in the reproduction process. Whereas the primary sex organs perform primary important functions. Okay, tissue culture. Okay, Tissue culture. Okay, so first of all, let me get this done with. Primary organs perform a primary function. Secondary organs perform some secondary functions. They perform some other functions which are apart from the main function of gametogenesis, that is production of gametes. Okay, so that is the difference between primary and secondary sex organs. Now we come to tissue culture. Now Lord has asked me if tissue culture is important. Now tissue culture is a form of, it is a form of artificial vegetative propagation. Okay, it is a form of artificial vegetative propagation. But again, in your textbook, it is in a green box. If you see, it is in a green box. Now, usually the things in the green box are not meant for assessment. Okay, if you see, as per CBSE rules, the things in the green box are not meant for assessment in examinations. However, sometimes they are asked. For example, in your heredity chapter, there is the concept of DNA study and molecular phylogeny. Right? There is the concept of DNA study and molecular phylogeny, and it is in a green box. Right, the structure of DNA, we compare the different the structures of the DNA, and if they have similarities, we say that they are related. If they don't have similarities, we say they are not related. Right, so that is in a green box just below the artificial selection of wild cabbage. But again, this question has been asked in sample papers, and even 1 year this question has been asked: can DNA study help in studying evolution? So again, molecular phylogeny is in one way being asked. So if molecular phylogeny can be asked, you never know, tissue culture can also be asked. So don't miss out tissue culture. Okay, just go through it once. There is the callus. You take out some cells from the growing tips of a plant, then they are put in a hormone medium, and then they develop a bit, and then this group of developed cells is what we call callus. This callus is transferred to a water medium, nutrition medium, where it grows into a new plant. So we are using a group of cells, which is a tissue, using a hormone medium and artificial medium to grow new plants. This is basically tissue culture. Okay. So don't forget it. Just go through it once. It's not a very difficult portion. Just go through it once. It will be okay. Right? Callus and hormonal medium, how we use groups and collections of cells to grow new plants. Okay. So that's your tissue culture. Is there any other doubt? So I'll move on. If there is any other doubt, please ask me. Don't hesitate. Please keep asking me if you have any kinds of doubts. Okay, I'll address them. So I was discussing what all was important in this chapter, right? I was just discussing what all we should understand in this chapter. So I told you that the types of reproduction, then sexual and asexual reproduction, and the types of asexual reproduction are important. Okay, please go through that. Please be thorough with that. Okay. Now we come to the diagrams. In this chapter, a major part is the diagrams. Okay, if you are not clear with the diagrams, please practice diagrams, because this chapter is the only chapter in the whole science portion this year, because ray diagrams are there in physics, but again they are pretty simple. But this is the only chapter in biology where diagrams are there and they will trouble you. So please practice the diagrams, out of which I'll tell you which are the most important diagrams. The first most important diagram is binary fission in amoeba. Very important diagram. And this is especially asked in the practical section. So please go over your practical book also. Okay. Cutting, layering, grafting. It's not there in your course. Okay. Cutting, layering, grafting is not there in your course. It is just extra. If you are asked about vegetative propagation for 5 marks, you can write about cutting, layering, grafting. It will just give an impression to the examiner. Oh, for preliminaries it has been given. But again, preliminaries are from school, right? Preliminaries are not from the board. The board does not ask you. Okay. Preliminaries are from the school. The preliminaries are set up by the school. They are not set up by the board. But the paper for you will come from the board. Whether you are giving school or board examination, the paper will be from the board. So don't worry, okay? Prelims are from the school. That's why what the school teaches you, they will ask. But again, the board paper may not ask you these things, because not every school has been taught this, right? That's why. But anyway, just go through it. That's why I'm telling you. Just go through it once. Then the important parts are binary fission in amoeba. That diagram is very, very important. Okay, please go through this diagram, especially in your practical book. In your practicals, this is an important diagram. They ask you specific steps. Okay, the second important diagram is germination of pollen on the stigma. That important diagram, that is the most important diagram. I cannot tick more than this. It is the most important diagram. Why? Every year a question has come from this. Every year for the past 4 years, every year a question is there from germination of pollen, and usually it is for the identification and labeling of this diagram. Sometimes it has been asked to draw this diagram. So please, this diagram is important, easy, to the point diagram. Please be clear with this. Okay. The third important diagram is the germination of a dicot seed. Now, germination of a dicot seed, again from your practicals. From your practical portion, it is extremely crucial. Germination of a dicot seed, plumule. This includes your plumule, your radicle, okay, your cotyledons. Okay, all these things come under your germination of dicot seed. Please be clear with this. Please go through this diagram. It's an easy diagram. It's drawn like this. Okay, then we draw something like this. Okay, and finally then there will be some kind of this. Okay, and then like this we go something like that. Okay, so something like that will be there, right? It's pretty simple and to the point. Okay, so this will be your cotyledon. This will be your plumule. This will be your radicle. This will be your cotyledon. To the point direct diagram, nothing very tough in this, right? To the point direct diagram is there. Just draw that. To the point, we are done. So germination of a dicot seed, very important. After that, the fourth important diagram is the male and female reproductive system in human beings. Male and female reproductive system in human beings. Now, here the thing is that the board is very dayalu and very merciful. They have not asked the drawing of this diagram as per my knowledge for a long time. For a long time, they have not asked you to draw this diagram, but labeling of this diagram has come. So please be clear with that. You never know, the board is a very unpredictable organization. They may ask you to draw it this year. So please go over the drawing of this diagram. I know the female one is easier than the male one. The male one is very difficult. I agree. Okay, for some people who are not good at art, it is terrible. So pollination by insects. I need to check. Term by pollination of insects. Let me just complete this. Once I am done with that, I'll go. Actually, they will not ask you these things because the board cannot ask you things which are not there in the text. Okay, however, I'll just check it for you. Okay, by insects. I'm not too sure actually. Pollination by insects. This process is called entomophily. Entomophily. Okay, it is called entomophily. So insect pollination is known as entomophily. Entomophily. Okay, entomophily. Insect pollination is called entomophily. Okay, Lord, that is the process of insect pollination. Pollination by insects is called entomophily. Okay, then for wind there is a separate kind, for animals there is a separate kind, but for insects it's entomophily. Okay, very direct to the point. Okay, entomophily. But they will not ask you, as I've told you, unless it's in the textbook, they cannot ask you. As per board, they will not ask you if it's not there in the textbook. But please write it for your knowledge. It's very interesting because again, biology is interesting. So please be clear with that. Okay, whatever I teach you, whatever you read, please be clear with it. You should be able to answer with good answers, good points, so that the examiner knows you're writing well. So as I was discussing, male and female reproductive systems are very important. You should be clear with male and female reproductive systems. Okay, their labelings, their diagram drawing, please be clear with that. Okay, So that's with your male and female reproductive system. So I hope these are the diagrams and I hope you're clear with the diagrams. Okay, that's good. After that, we come to another important part of this chapter, that is contraceptive methods. That is under your reproductive health. Please, 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 please be clear with this, because again, contraceptive methods are important. One question is a must per year. Per year, one question has to come from contraceptive methods. This is again an important portion. The things which can be asked from this are the reasons for contraception. Okay, reasons for contraception, and the reasons for contraception are very, very direct. There are two main reasons. Number one, to prevent pregnancy, and the second one is to prevent STDs. So two very, very simple and direct reasons here. Very, very direct, very, very clear. This is a question which has been asked a lot of times, the reasons for contraceptive methods and why they are adopted. For that, you just need to talk about these two reasons, that is prevention of pregnancy and prevention of STDs, that is sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, now STDs are sexually transmitted diseases. Now there are two kinds of STDs in your textbook, bacterial and viral. Now bacterial STDs include syphilis and gonorrhea, and your viral STDs include AIDS and warts. Okay, please be clear with this. Okay, the two kinds of STDs, bacterial and viral. There is syphilis and gonorrhea in your bacterial, and viral are AIDS and warts. Okay, those are your contraceptive methods. Now the reasons for contraception and the types of STDs. After that, we come to the methods of contraception. There are four categories of contraception. Categories of contraception. You can be asked 2, you can be asked 3, you can be asked all 4 for a 5-mark question. So categories of contraception, there are 4 main categories in your textbook. One is the chemical method. This chemical method involves your pills and spermicides. Okay, again, these are chemicals. These are basically things which the female takes to change hormonal balance or to kill the sperms which enter the body, and hence it prevents pregnancy. Does not prevent STDs. Remember, chemical method does not prevent STDs necessarily. Number 2, mechanical method. Or you can talk about mechanical barriers. This basically involves condoms, predominantly condoms, and it can include diaphragms and cervical caps. Okay, again, this is important. Second one. Third one, after mechanical method comes your IUCDs, and IUCDs stand for intrauterine contraceptive devices. Intrauterine contraceptive devices. Okay, and basically here you have to talk about the loop and copper T. The loop or copper T, right? And then the fourth category is the surgical method, which basically involves surgery operations on the vas deferens or the oviduct, and it involves two kinds based on the gender. We have vasectomy, which is for males, and we have tubectomy, which is for females, right? So these are the categories of contraception. Please be clear with this. It is essential that you are clear with this categories of contraception, and you should also know their side effects. Very, very important. Side effects of each of them, at least one side effect of each. For chemical method, it can cause hormonal imbalance, right? For this, the chemical method, it is hormonal imbalance. It can cause hormonal imbalance. For mechanical barriers, the condoms can break during intercourse. Please remember, condoms can break during intercourse. Hence, mechanical barriers, this is the side effect or drawback. IUCD, the drawback is it can cause irritation in the uterus and ultimate infection also. And surgical method, it basically involves that if the surgery is not done properly, there can be infection, and since there is infection, there can be problems in the female or the male, right? And it is a permanent method, it cannot be reversed. There is irreversibility in this method. Okay, so I hope that's absolutely clear. These are the categories of contraception, direct, and their side effects. You should know what all comes under these categories. You should know. Okay, so this is all with your reproductive health and your contraceptive methods. Right, that was important. After that, one more important portion in this chapter is fertilization in flowers. Fertilization in flowers, a very favorite, it's the favorite question of the CBSE. They always ask one question at least from this. Okay, fertilization in flowers, the parts of a flower, the reproductive parts of a flower, the reproductive parts of an angiosperm. All these are very commonly asked. Please go through it very well, right? Fertilization in flowers, basically the pollen grains, anther, stigma, all that you should know, right? Then the pollination process, types of pollination. Again, that in this your parts of a flower are important. Parts of a flower. Then you should know about the process of pollination, right? And pollination is the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the pistil of a flower by the use of various agents. Next, we come to the process of growth of pollen tube. Growth of pollen tube. Again, this is what your germination of pollen. Okay, after growth of pollen tube, we come to fertilization. And then your ovary, mature ovary turns into the fruit. And your ovules turn into the seeds. Right? That's it. So these are the important parts, okay, in your this process. Now, Lord has asked a question, term associated with pollination by insect. Also, I read that. Why is DNA copying necessary during reproduction? Okay, it's a very direct and easy question. Why DNA copying is essential? Now, see, there is one thing you need to understand, okay? Basically, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid, right? Very direct. Now, this deoxyribonucleic acid is an essential biochemical acid. Essential biochemical acid. Okay, very important. Because it holds hereditary characteristics. Hereditary characteristics and transfers characteristics or codes for different traits. Codes for different characteristics. Because using this DNA and the information in the DNA, the cell makes proteins. And since it makes proteins, these proteins are the ones which initiate the expression of a particular trait, which we have studied in heredity and evolution. So this DNA is an essential biochemical acid, essential component of nucleus. And for an organism to be produced, characteristics need to be transferred. So from parent to offspring, whether it is sexual or asexual form of reproduction, what needs to happen? Transfer of characteristics need to take place. Characteristics need to be transferred. Now, since characteristics need to be transferred, that can only be transferred through a particular medium. Now, the parent has some DNA. That DNA needs to replicate. So, it needs to create copies. And these copies will carry the traits of this DNA. and hence these copies will be carried to the offspring and the offspring will retain the characteristics of the parent. Hence, DNA copying is essential for number 1, transfer of characteristics, and number 2, in order for the offspring to create its own body design. Offspring needs to create its own body design, and it can only create this body design by using a source, and DNA is the source for making the proteins which enables an organism to create its own body design, right? So two main reasons: number 1, transfer of characteristics from parents to offspring, and number 2, offsprings need to create their own body design, and hence they use DNA as a source to produce proteins which helps them to create their body design along with the cellular apparatus which is replicated from the parent to the offspring. Again, we have to create a new cellular apparatus for the offspring. So using that apparatus as well as the DNA replica from the parent, the organism is able to create its own body design. Clear, Lord? Is there any kind of doubt you still have in your mind? I hope that's absolutely clear. All right. So I hope, Lord, that clears your doubt. If so, please just send me a message if it does. If it doesn't, please let me know. Right. So I have discussed almost everything which I wanted to discuss in this process. Okay. There's one very important, very interesting question that I've seen a lot of times come. Okay. So please just pay attention to this. A very interesting question. The question is that you need to define that kind of asexual reproduction. So mention the type of asexual reproduction in which parent organism loses its identity. Loses its identity to give rise to daughter cells. To give rise to daughter cells. Right? To give rise to daughter cells. Now, what kind of reproduction is it? Now, when you look into this question, you have many doubts in your mind because it can be this question can be answered with many types of asexual reproduction. You can say fragmentation, right? Because again, the organism is breaking, right? So it can be fragmentation, or it can be binary fission, or it can be multiple fission, right? So what kind of reproduction is it? Can't it be fragmentation? Now that is the doubt here. Let us code this question. Mention the type of asexual reproduction which parent organism loses its identity to give rise to daughter cells. First of all, read this part. Daughter cells. In fragmentation, does the organism give rise to daughter cells? No, it does not. In fragmentation, basically what happens? The parent organism breaks. If you see, if you have a look at a Spirogyra filament, and if you look at a Spirogyra filament, in a Spirogyra filament, if you look at it closely, what happens? It basically breaks from a particular point. So then it is going to break and give rise to two fragments. So this is how it is going to do. It is going to break into two fragments. So this is one Spirogyra filament. And this Spirogyra is going to break into two fragments. This is fragment 1, this is fragment 2. But number 1, these are not cells. These are multicellular organisms. First and foremost, they are not cells. They are multicellular organisms. So again, this is ruled out. Fragmentation cannot be the answer because they've asked daughter cells, not daughter organisms. So here make sure that this is not the answer. Fragmentation is not the answer. Another reason why fragmentation is not the answer is because here the parental organism is not losing its identity. Please try to understand. It may seem that the parental organism is losing its identity, but it is not. Why? Because it is simply breaking. See, this is still a part. That organism has not perished. Okay? The parent organism is not perishing. It is just breaking. So when it breaks into two organisms which develop into new spirogera filaments. It is not losing its identity. Be clear with that. Okay, that is why fragmentation is not the answer. So the only answer which can be correct here is fission. Because if you look at both the kinds of fission, you will see that the parent organism is losing its identity. If you look at binary fission, amoeba divides and completely the parental organism, amoeba cannot be seen. Now only the daughter cells can be seen. Similarly, if you look into plasmodium, it's multiple fission. Inside the cyst, its nuclei are going to divide continuously, and when they divide, ultimately they will all develop plasms of their own. And when the cyst will break, these plasmodium cells will, they will be set free, and ultimately there will be many plasmodium daughter cells. Okay, so that is why the answer to this is fission and not fragmentation. Clear with that? I hope you're absolutely clear with that, all of you. If you are, please give me a yes, give me a thumbs up. If not, I'll explain it again. Right? Whew, so I have pretty much covered whatever I wanted to discuss. Okay, now I think most of you have few people done in your school the concept of double fertilization. Double fertilization in plants. Have you people done it in school? Just tell me if you have. If you have, it's well and good. If you haven't, just tell me. Double fertilization in plants. If you have done it, just tell me. If you haven't, just tell me. Okay. If you have, please tell me. Have you guys done double fertilization? If you have, please let me know. Otherwise, I can explain it. It's a very interesting concept. It's basically higher level than what you have done in your schools, because in the NCRT it's pretty basic. But again, my school taught this. Okay, so that is why double fertilization, I may do it. And Lord, you are asking reproductive isolation. That is part of heredity and evolution. I did that yesterday. But anyway, okay, you've done double fertilization. Well and good. Please be clear with this. Just in case the board asks whatever this is, please be clear with it. Okay, the board can sometimes ask. Please be clear with it. The primary endosperm nucleus and the syngamy, that is the reproduction, that is the fertilization of male and female gametes. All that you should be clear, right? Please be clear with that. So now double fertilization. I think I'll leave it. I just wanted to ask you if you have done it. If you have, very good. If you haven't done it, I don't think it's much of a problem because it's not there in the textbook. So I doubt it can come. But please, if you have done it, please go through it once in your school. Right? It's an important concept. It's an interesting concept. Now, Lord has asked me what is double fertilization. So sorry, not double fertilization. He has asked me what is reproductive isolation. So reproductive isolation. Again, as I discussed, reproductive isolation is part of heredity and evolution. It is not a part of how do organisms reproduce. But anyway, you have asked me the question, so I'll give you the answer. Now, reproductive isolation is basically a factor which affects speciation. It is one of the factors of speciation. There are four factors we all know: natural selection, genetic drift, geographical isolation, and reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation is one of the factors that affect speciation. So how does reproductive isolation work? Now, as this word suggests, reproductive isolation, isolation in terms of reproduction. Organisms are unable to reproduce amongst themselves due to reproductive isolation. There is some isolation in terms of reproduction, right? For example, I have organism A and then I have organism B. Now, these two organisms are unable to reproduce. Unable to reproduce. They are unable to reproduce because of certain factors. One may be that they are of different kinds. Okay, they are of different kinds. For example, its chromosome number is X and its chromosome number is Y. So these two cannot reproduce, right? They cannot reproduce because their chromosome numbers are different, because they are from different kinds of organisms. Their species are different. So if their chromosome number is different, they are unable to reproduce amongst themselves, right? So if the chromosome numbers are different, they cannot reproduce amongst themselves, because if they try to reproduce, the organism won't be produced, the progeny won't be produced, because their chromosome numbers are different and they're of different species. Different species will have different chromosome number. After that, there may be other ways. For example, this organism A, suppose is a female and organism B is a male, then maybe this organism A's behavior will be such that reproduction between A and B will not occur. The behavior will prevent reproduction. Her behavior will be such that they will not be able to reproduce. They will not be able to mate with each other, right? Because her behavior is such. She is not allowing the organism B to mate with it to produce offsprings. So this form of isolation, which prevents reproduction amongst organisms because of certain factors, is known as reproductive isolation, right? So this phenomena of the inability to reproduce because of certain factors, that prevent production of progeny or copulation. Copulation basically means mating. So, inability to reproduce because of certain factors that prevent production of progeny or copulation. This process is known as reproductive isolation, that is isolation in terms of reproductive factors. Clear? I hope that's absolutely clear. Lord, is there any doubt? Are you still in any kind of doubt? So, Lord, is it clear? Whew. So that's reproductive isolation. It's a part of evolution. It's one of the factors of speciation, because if two organisms are unable to reproduce amongst themselves, maybe it's a reason because their chromosome numbers are different, or even if they are of the same kind, if they are unable to reproduce amongst themselves, they'll be forced to reproduce amongst their local populations, and this will again lead to accumulation of variations over generations, which will make them so different from one another that they will not be able to reproduce and will not be able to be classified into the same species. They will form two different species, right? So I hope that's absolutely clear. That's one factor of speciation, reproductive isolation, right? Okay. So with that, I am pretty much done with what I wanted to cover in this chapter. If you still have any kind of doubt, okay, please ask me. I am all ready for your doubts. Is there any kind of doubt? Still any doubt? Lord, I hope you understood reproductive isolation. Do you still have a doubt in reproductive isolation? Right. Okay. So I hope that I'm pretty much done with what I wanted to cover in how do organisms reproduce. Please go over whatever I've taught you. The reproduction definition, the forms of reproduction, the diagrams which I have marked specifically, they should be covered very, very well. Please go over all these things, and I'm sure if you work really hard, you score brilliant in your exams. So I think I'll wrap up the session today. If there is no doubt left, I'll wrap up the session today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have gained some tips, some methods, some important parts which you need to focus on. And if you're weak in them, please start working hard. How chromosome number is maintained, that is also important. What are the benefits of sexual reproduction over asexual reproduction? That is important. Okay, that is extremely crucial because sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction difference is important, but the benefits of sexual reproduction over asexual reproduction is also important. That there will be evolution, there will be more variation, there will be more diversity. Okay, there will be higher chances of survival amongst organisms. Okay, so okay, full form of HIV. Full form of HIV is simple, beta. Full form of HIV is HIV stands for human immunodeficiency virus. Okay, human immunodeficiency virus, and it is this HIV which causes AIDS, and AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, right? So I hope that's clear. HIV is the virus which causes AIDS. HIV stands for human immunodeficiency virus. AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Okay, so I hope it's clear. They are both viral diseases. So AIDS is a disease which is caused due to the HIV virus, which infects the red blood cells, and these red blood cells get infected. Ultimately, they will lead to infection of different cells, and ultimately it will lead to death because there will be several problems. Lymph nodes will be affected, then your the lymphatic system will be affected, the lymphatic vessels will be infected. So because of all that, there will be a large reduction in the power to fight infections, and HIV reduces the immunity power, and because of that, if even small infections occur, the body is unable to fight these infections, and ultimately because of the accumulation of so many infections, the person dies, and it is transferred through sexual contact and through blood transfusion. Okay, so that is your HIV and AIDS. Clear? So that's all I think for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you learned something, and I hope you are clear with this chapter. If you still have any kind of doubt in this chapter, please, all doubts are welcome in the comment section below. Goodbye. I wish you all the best for your future, all the best for your science examination, and maybe I'll take up a revision session for another chapter very soon. Thank you very much for joining me. Goodbye. Stay healthy, stay smart, and do keep studying. Bye bye.